Richard, the Creativity and Culture Conference, last year and the year before, we've been talking about creativity, and, people have very different definitions and very different approaches to creativity, regardless of, whether they are in business or artists, even in these domains, people have a very broad range. And what's your view of creativity and innovation? How would you approach these two concepts?
Yes, so I guess where I come from is primarily about accessing the subconscious mind. So it's a state of flow. So I guess the contrary to that is where you're trying to cognitively think. So it could be the sort of a lot of mind mapping stuff, a lot of Myers-Briggs, where you're actively doing exercises, whereas I'm more about trying to get into a program where I use emotions to draw up ideas, and then I preload the brain, and then I use emotions to draw it up. So that's where I come from. Now it's all a balance, but that's where my emphasis is, so.
Richard, are you dialing in from a mobile phone? Or
no, I'm dialing in through my computer and the internet. Is that a problem?
Something is moving. Something is rocking, and I'm just...
All right, it's my legs.
Is it your legs that are rocking?
I'll go and stand up 1 second then.
Yeah, you don't have to stand up. I'm sitting down. It's just that there was was the chair that you were sitting on, was it rocking?
It's a rocking little chair, yes.
That's what it was then. Yes. Okay, and now the screen just needs to be tilted. Yes. Do you not have like a hard chair to sit on?
Yeah, I can go and sit. I can go and do that.
Chair, I think, yeah.
Let me go out.
Just want you to be comfortable, but there's just so much rocking there that is going to make people feel dizzy.
Oh, let's go into the sunshine a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, excellent. Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah. That's stable now. That's stable. Yes. Okay, brilliant. So,
apologies.
Yes, that's fine. So,
just technically, are you recording this for the event then? Is this like
yeah. So what will happen is that we'll have a conversation, and then I will edit it. I will, top and tail it, and then I will, towards the end of August, when I've had a chance to look at all of them, then I will touch base with you again, and I will say, this is how I've done it. Is it okay for me to use it for the conference?
Okay.
And say yes or no. Okay,
so you want a reasonable background then, don't you? You want a more interesting background if I'm going to do this. Let's go.
That is an interesting background.
Oh, that's not good.
Last year I had...
So what's your background then? What's your background to this world?
Well, my PhD was in creativity, so I'm a teacher background. I taught for a very long time, and then I decided to do a PhD, and I explored the concept of creativity in terms of how we teach it, in terms of how we promote it, in terms of how we reward it.
Yes.
And so while I was doing that research, I set up these online conferences in 2017. So this will be the third one that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the conference was to provide a space so that academics and entrepreneurs and educators can learn to see things from different perspectives. Because what I noticed is that academics have a very different concept of creativity, and the entrepreneurs have a very different, sometimes it's more to do with the commercial aspects of creativity, whereas the academics are looking at forwarding the research into it, because there isn't a lot of research into creativity relatively. It's
Got
not,
you, got you.
and so
Yeah.
that was the initial purpose. And I had been attending a lot of conferences around the world, and I just thought that rather than traveling to California for 3 days, it seemed to be a waste of money and a waste of time to travel very long distances just simply to attend a conference. And so I decided to set up the online conferences where we can, I mean, last year I had people from many different countries like Antigua and Canada and the
Yeah,
US,
yeah, yeah.
New Zealand, Australia. So that wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the online version of a
Got
conference.
you. Okay, so I'm settled. Is this good enough now?
Very nice, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, it's excellent. So let's start with creativity and innovation. So in your world, how do you think of creativity and innovation?
Okay, so I guess my world is in the world of branding and communication. And so a lot of it is about the emotion and engaging people with emotion. So I guess my specialist area is around the subconscious, accessing the subconscious mind and using emotions to draw up thoughts. So aligning your emotional idea of how do I want to make someone feel, and then finding ideas that draw that up and using the brain in that way.
And I suppose not a lot of people start by thinking, how do I want the other person to feel? Very often it's what's in it for me, what's the outcome that I want, rather than how do I want the other person to feel. So that's quite a unique way of approaching our communication, isn't it?
Yeah, and people often think of feelings as a cognitive thought as opposed to a body thought or a body feeling. So for me, it's very much about how is somebody going to feel in their body as opposed to a cognitive idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then tapping into that. So, yes.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of successful people, they do say that part of their success is based on how they've made other people feel, because if you've made people feel good, they will remember you positively, even if that's the only thing you had to offer them, is that you made them feel good. They want to be around you.
Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the primary things in my world, in terms of communication or anything, is you've got to have the ability to connect emotionally and feel.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's a speaker, so often in a more academic world, that then becomes a challenge because it's like the concept, but you're not really communicating through the feeling.
Yes. So a lot of intellectualization can be very detached, or appear to be very detached from the.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the basic formula that says if you want somebody, all our actions are driven by our emotions, not our thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So emotions are the key to human behavior. So actually, when you look to communicate, if you're not building it around an emotion, you're not building it around the key driver for action.
Mm-hmm.
So they can have thoughts, but not drive any actions. So therefore, when I use my creativity, it's all about finding that emotion and using that to then bring out the idea.
Do you find that it's easier for you to be creative when you are working within an organization, or is it easier to be creative when you're working freelance on your own or in a
freelance, totally freelance, but within a group of people. So like a collaboration of people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better to have, for me, I find it really useful to have periods of working on my own and then periods of coming together in groups of people, with groups of people, whether that's within corporate organizations or colleagues in.
So forming networks.
Exactly. But it's a combination of working in isolation and then coming together and bouncing off. But neither is the ideal solution. So neither is it perfect just working by yourself, and neither is it perfect always just working in groups. It's that combination.
It has to be a combination, because creativity doesn't occur in a vacuum.
Exactly.
And also there's lots of stages of creativity. It's not just about having the ideas. We need to have those ideas evaluated. And how can we evaluate without we can self-evaluate, but self-evaluation doesn't always lead to products or services that will sell.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, in my world, the world is not seen but constructed. So people are totally constructing their perceptions of the world. So without them interacting, without sort of testing it with people, then the idea is irrelevant. What I think, it's actually how people engage with it. And you can learn so much from that. So we're often doing research or just testing ideas.
Mm-hmm. Right. And within organizations, highly creative people are often seen to be disruptive, and they're seen to be difficult to manage. In your experience, have you experienced that yourself personally, or noticed other people being mismanaged just because they were trying to express their ideas and their creativity?
I think the bottom line is yes. And the reason for yes is one simple rule that habit creates dullness. So if you're just habitually doing the same thing, habitually going to the same office, habitually doing this, then actually the brain gets into a pattern and gets lazy and it becomes dull. And so you have to be a maverick. You have to say, I'm just going to go a different route. I'm not going to go in at this time. I'm just, for the hell of it, I'm just going to sit over there today. And so organizations actually require you to fit into a habitual pattern, but that actually kills creativity for me.
Yes. Yeah, there's that tension between the status quo, being comfortable and trying to be harmonious and fit in, as you say,
Yes.
and being being able to have the freedom to express something which goes against the grain. People don't like
exactly. You've got to have a habit of doing things irregularly. You've got to have a habit of changing your mind. You've got to have a habit of trying new things.
Mm-hmm.
That's the habit that you form, not a habit of consistency. So.
And Peter Senge talks to a great extent about learning organizations, that organizations have to be continuously learning.
Yes.
And learning implies change of some sort. There has to be a change in behavior or a change in our thinking, the change in our paradigms for learning to have occurred. And there is also this saying that when we stop growing, when we stop learning, we stop growing, and when we stop growing, we start dying. Have you heard that expression?
Yeah, no, exactly. And it sort of links to the whole idea of we learn more from the mistakes that we make. And it's that willingness to learn and to be comfortable making mistakes. And that's what when I understand an organization willing to grow, yes, you have to do it quickly and all of those things, but you've got to be willing to try things and not have a culture of blame. And that's, for me, a growing culture and a growing organization.
Yes. And I suppose we have to be careful when we're being creative, we have to be careful not to come across as attacking all the time.
Yeah. So and it's a really interesting one, because I've been a creative myself, but also working with other creatives. It can be a very defensive, because you're very vulnerable. If you're willing to go there, if you're willing to, the point of creativity is to stand there and say, I do not know the answer. Right now, I do not know. Otherwise, I'm just using a formula. Otherwise, I'm just using acquired knowledge to solve a problem. Mm-hmm. So to be creative, you have to say, right now, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And that's a brave place to stand in front of people and say, I don't know that. I will find it. I'm going to explore it. Mm-hmm. I will put my neck on the line and say, yes, look to me for an answer. But right now, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And so that becomes it's a very difficult place. And people then can become very defensive, So.
And when you're working by yourself as a freelance person, then there's other challenges. You don't have to justify your actions to anyone because you are your own boss. But what are the challenges that highly creative people face when they don't have a boss to answer to?
It's interesting, because you'd think it was a total freedom to do what you like. But if you think about it from a Maslow's needs of hierarchy, one of the things that you need to do is secure a solid base in who you are. So that, I think, is the biggest challenge. You have to create a financial security, and you have to create a inner belief security, and then you can have the full freedom that an independent life has. Mm-hmm. If you don't have either of those two, then actually it becomes a negative burden on yourself. Mm-hmm. So financial security and a willingness from that as a platform of strength to try things.
And maybe this is one of the reasons that people wait until they retire to start their own businesses, to set up their own creative enterprises, because before that they're still trying to pay off the mortgage, they're still, you know, these constraints.
Exactly. Yeah. Or you sit there and say, I have nothing to lose, and therefore I'm quite happy to roll the dice. But when you're caught in between, when you've got commitments to a certain degree, then, you know, it's natural to sort of look to other people and say, well, I need to play it safe. So
yeah. So this thing about disruptive technologies, people talk a lot about disruptive technologies these days, as though disruptive technology is always good. Do you?
Yes.
It's not always good, is it?
No. So it was interesting. I was at a conference a bit back. It was about innovation, and it was about how wonderful is innovation. And I totally understand that, you know, huge developments in all areas, and disruptive technology is a leading part of that. However, we have to be aware that actually sometimes we create that disruptive technology for our own purpose, and actually too much innovation is a bad thing from society, from a whole point of view. So we have to look at the root source. You know, do we need another 12 washing powders? You know, do we need to find a different way to this? What are we really being disruptive around? And what is it that's just a stage for us to sort of feel like we're doing it from the wrong motivation? So I think.
Yeah. So for example, you know, people always use examples like Uber as being an example of a disruptive technology. But so Uber has, you know, provided many benefits and cheaper, faster, you know, more convenient, whereas it has taken away business from existing taxi drivers, taken away livelihoods. So there is always the underside, the dark side of these disruptive technologies. Even Airbnb is treated as another disruptive technology, but you know, there might be drawbacks to that as well.
Yes, the biggest one for me is the rate of change, and how quickly you can allow change just to come into society, because that starts to develop a culture of throwaway. And it becomes so fast. And one of the things that I really believe in is that if you allow things to become quiet, then the mundane becomes the magical. And that's when true creativity comes in, that you find these beautiful things that come from a more genuine source, not from the need for just innovate, new ideas. So that's.
Yes, because the impression I get is that even companies like Google, who pride themselves on being highly creative, and they have all these, you know, spaces for their employees to relax and have fun, but it just seems to be contrived.
It's designed to keep them working longer. It seems to me, it's you know, whilst you know, it's a classic example of anything in life has positive and negatives, right? And you know, you can spend your entire life in the branding world just promoting the positives. So something like that, there are great positives, but it's being aware of the negative implications for that, and stuff like that. So yes.
So in your work in branding, you know, how does creative, you know, of course, branding in it's like you have to be creative in order to provide a good service in branding, but are there ways in which you are different to other people who do work similar to yours?
As I said, the primary difference is about the emotion, and recognizing that it is actually in the body. So I do a lot of body work. I do a lot of physical movement work, a lot of breathing exercises, and I become more present in my body, and I do a lot of mindfulness. So I think that's probably the biggest difference between myself and what you might call a more corporate branding person. Whereas I am trying to connect at a deeper, more emotional level with whatever it is, whether it's a color, an idea, a concept, and then seeing how it resonates in my body, and therefore trying to connect with that and understand that. So yes, so it's about the emotion, it's about the frequency of the idea, it's about the truth and the honesty of the idea, and that's very much what I try and do.
So it's about, is it personal branding or
No,
branding?
it's corporate brands. So yeah, so anything from a university all the way through to a startup biotechnology company. But it's about recognizing, for me, that every audience I think about, I think that they're in pain. I think at the end of the day, there's a pain there that I need to help solve, and that's where the creative solution is. So what is it that this product, service, organization can do and can engage them in a way that meets that pain in a wholesome way? It doesn't mask it. So if you imagine just the human body, we have needs, and we can meet those needs by adding other layers to it, more stuff. Or we can actually just dismantle that and make somebody more whole. And I think that's what I try and do with my branding work, try and make people feel more whole and talk to them in a more authentic way, as opposed to just driving them to have bigger needs and then become more frustrated. So that's the difference.
Right, so it's getting right down to the core, the essence of a person's being, or the essence of an organization.
Yeah, and you ask some very fundamental questions. What is it to be human? What is it to belong on this planet? What makes us happy? And then therefore, as a brand, if we're not really asking those questions, what we're doing is adding to people's needs. So for example, I could make you want to change the color of your wall, and say, okay, let's not have it that color, let's have it another color. Oh, and now that other color is not any good anymore. Choose another color, bye, all right? Whereas actually, wouldn't it be better to make you just really appreciate that color and be happy with what you do? So that's yeah. So
right, but then does that sell? If I'm happy with the color of my wall and you're trying to sell me paint, and
yes.
at the end of it, it's like, well, I'll say, well, no, actually, this is fine just the way it is.
Yes.
Commercially, is that viable?
Well, because in the new models, it has to be, yeah, because the planet can't cope with just producing more, consuming more, developing more. And the new brands that are coming out and the brands that I work with are trying to respond to that. And they're trying to communicate authentically. So yeah, I would never work with an organization that just literally wanted to increase sales of a product that without the authenticity of meeting a real need. So,
right. Again, it's this, so there is that tension of that. If people tend to buy things because they are made to feel discontent with what they already have.
They increase their pain. Yes. Basically, marketing increases your pain to the point where you buy something to remove that pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yes.
You're going against that, great.
Yes. Yeah. What you do is you recognize the pain, and then you feel that pain, and then you understand how that product genuinely meets it. And most of the time when you go to an organization, there's a genuine message to be had. They don't have to sell by always increasing your pain. It's an easy thing to do for me to tell you that actually you're going to feel awful with that when somebody comes around and looks at the color of your house and says that's old fashioned. And it's like, oh, right, I need to do that. Whereas if I just say to you that actually it's so lovely, if you change it to yellow, you'll be just feeling amazing in the morning, then you can choose to change it to yellow because you want to feel amazing in the morning.
Right.
That's
yes.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there, and I think brands are really changing now. There's a thing called spiral dynamics, which is about the evolution of society and how it's evolving. And we are definitely moving out of what's called the orange period, when it was all about mass consumption, innovation, new ideas. And there is now a responsibility to deal with innovation in the correct way. And therefore you can use ideas to solve things differently. And I think that's the next generation that we're coming through. So,
is it the green? Are we going into the phase of the
teal? No, we're going into the teal now. So we're in the green at the moment, but the next level is teal.
is teal, right? I
Yeah.
suppose countries like in Scandinavia, they're already practicing.
Exactly. Holland, very, very big in the Scandinavian, Holland countries, all those. Yes. So that's,
Yeah.
it's coming through to this country as well in terms of how organizations are structured and therefore how they're innovating within organization. There is far more authenticity that's going to come through. We're going to look back at this period. And this is what's lovely about innovation. We look back and go, why on earth did we do that?
Mm-hmm.
Why on earth were we in organizations which were just, it wasn't filling our souls. We weren't doing the right things by the planet. What was going on? And it was all part of an industrial revolution, all of those things. And now we're starting to come through.
So the Industrial Revolution, it's like the orange phase, the creation of plastic to make things.
Exactly.
And
The counter to the institutional stuff, the big governments, and it's like, oh no, let's go off and do our entrepreneurial thing.
And I suppose the green is like about recycling, making a business out of recycling.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly. But it still uses the same hierarchical model of still somebody, senior person, but it's still for good. It has more of an ethical thing. Whereas now the organizational structure is more of a collaborative, flat structure. And that's the way things are generally going. So, yes. And therefore it's driving innovation in a totally different way. And so one of the things for me, one of the key things about Teal, for example, is you listen.
Mm-hmm.
And now listening isn't just listening in terms of being aware of what somebody's saying, but it's about being quiet. And when you practice work that's about being quiet, ideas come up which are more authentic, which are more true. And if you're programming your body to look for questions in a way that's the right way, then those answers come up. So it's very much about attuning our bodies to be creative in the right way. And we can attune them to be one that's sort of pumping out ideas for more this, more of that, do this quicker, faster, bigger, right? Or we attune our bodies to say, no, what's here for good? What's here for wholesome thoughts? How do we align that? And we will start to see our bodies more in the future as vehicles that we attune to play the right note that we want it to play. Mm-hmm. Whereas at the moment, we're letting external factors play the notes that were coming out of us. And that's the issue when you talk about corporate organizations and you say, how are they helping creativity or not? Corporate organizations are really forcing people to play a similar tune and not allow them to find their own tune to play, and therefore what comes out of their mind and thoughts.
This is why many people like that have to go freelance, because the organization can't support them.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I run a whole lot of creative workshops within organizations, and every time I do that, 2 people leave. Every time. It's like, it's almost a guarantee.
The right place.
Yeah, because they've touched something in themselves that realize that actually this is what I want to do, and I can't do it here. Yes. Maybe that's a bad promotion for a creativity course.
I empathize with what you've just said, because when I was doing my coaching work, very often my clients would find that they're not in the right organization, and
totally
they would give in their notice, which
because they had pain, again, and people don't because people are not in their bodies enough, they don't realize that they're in pain. And therefore, they just add more, they consume more, they use more, they become addictive more, they work harder to numb the pain. And so true creativity is about, for me, going in and finding those ideas. And that, so we cognitively process something at any moment, 40 thoughts, they say, per second, in each moment. Whereas subconsciously, it's like in the millions. Mm-hmm. So we have this huge processing capability deep down in ourselves if we listen to it. And that's what I say about this thing about listening is one of the most creative tools we could do if we do it effectively. And we listen to our bodies, and we listen to other people, and we engage in a way that is really truly collaboratively. Then we we attune our bodies to doing good and to producing the right outputs, and we absorb the right things from the food that we eat, to the messages, to what ideas inspire us. And if we create an environment where we're attuned, we're digesting the right things, we will produce the right level of output.
Mm. Yes, and very often I don't think there's enough emphasis on digesting what is good for us. You know, something might be.
Not at all. No. And it's like alcohol. You know, I know many creatives who like to drink and think that just frees them up. What it does is it takes away some of the pain that they experience of rejection by people who don't feel stuff. So they have to do that. But what that's doing is it's taking you further away from yourself. So that to me is not the answer. It's sort of a quick fix for a pain relief, but it's not the deep thing. And that's why we get, you know, so many people in the creative industry are always battling this thing, but trying to come to source is a really important way.
Yeah, I suppose what people are trying to gain when they're drinking is that feeling of, you know, maybe it's that feeling
Freedom.
of freedom,
Exactly.
being
Relaxation. Yeah. And I've been there, you know, I've been taking part in that. It's all cool. You're having a laugh, but you're actually kidding yourself that you're in control of your whole body, and you're not. You're just handing it over, and you just relaxed, and you're saying what you like, and it's not with the right control. So for me, true creativity is living a creative life, and that's like a full life, a wholesome life, a rich life, and that is where we become our true essence, which is a creative beings. You know, we're here to manifest and create things, whether that's food, conversation, life, or branding, you know.
Yes. Yeah, and so many people, when they've been out drinking, they spend the next morning in bed.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's just, you know, if you attune your body so much, you realize that actually that wasn't good for me. I wasn't thinking any better. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of biohacking into the body and testing that I'm at peak performance and stuff like that. So I use a lot of cold baths. So I do cold baths in the morning, and mindfulness and getting myself into the right state like an athlete would.
Right.
I see the difference between that and creativity, you know. So.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because some research shows that when we're too alert, like your cold baths, for example, I imagine that they would make you very alert. And there's research to say that, you know, people who go to the gym, they exercise a lot, they're not as creative as those who perhaps lead a more docile lifestyle.
Life. I'd be interested to know who wrote that one. Yes. No. So from my own experience, genuinely my own experience, there is energy. You need energy in your body, and you need it to flow. So you need to be physically fit. You need to align your body fully, and therefore, and you need to be at this. It's called flow. Yeah, it's that classic state of flow where you're really relaxed, but you're highly awake. Yeah, and that's the peak performance. And what's really interesting is I have a little device that measures my heart rate variability. And all my best ideas are when I'm peaking at that place. And it's like I can look back and go, wow, yeah, I was in the flow. It was an amazing experience. And you build yourself up to that, and then I decline down, you know. So you can't stay in there forever. You reach it, and then you come down and rest, and you reach it and then rest. So.
Right, that's interesting. So you have started to notice different vibrations, different states of mind.
Totally. You know, I know where I am, and it's like, okay, now I'm not going to do any creative work. I'm not in that place. It's pointless. It's like pushing a train up a hill. I'm not going to achieve it, and it's just too hard work. So I'll just go and do some filing or phone people up, have conversations, client meetings, whatever. If I know I'm running a workshop, if I know I'm about to do a presentation, if I know I'm going to sit down for a couple of hours, work something, I will do, like an athlete would, preparation before that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will attend that period fully in the zone, and then I will allow the stuff to happen. So I do a lot of improvisation. I do a lot of improv. I will ask myself questions. I will role play. I will film it.
Mm-hmm.
And I will not be conscious of what I'm thinking. I will use a subconscious mind.
Right. Yes, because we do need to have a balance between the subconscious and the conscious, because obviously if it was only the subconscious, you wouldn't
Yeah.
be aware of
Of course. Of course. And the conscious mind is great. So I can physically get to a stage where my conscious mind is listening to my subconscious and going, actually, that was quite a good idea. Or that was a load of rubbish. So I can actually hear two minds working at the same time. I can just hear my voice talking from the subconscious, but my conscious mind is listening to what I'm saying.
And which do you think is more associated with productivity? Because productivity and creativity are quite distinct. Do you think that the subconscious might be more connected with the actual creative
Totally.
ideas? And
Yes. Yeah. So the conscious mind is a really good tool for structuring, finding the fastest way from A to B. That's its purpose. Yeah. It's about efficiency. It's designed to be fuel efficient for the brain and fuel efficient for the activities it does. The subconscious part of the brain works mainly with the body, but is designed to just process wide things and diverse ideas and in multiple layers. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So, Richard, is there anything else that you think is really important to say about creativity and innovation?
Yeah, well, let me just highlight what I think are the key things really going forward. So the creativity and innovation is really about getting you out of your head, because that's where the blocks happen. If you keep trying to think and think cognitively, it doesn't work. And the real technique for me is using the body work. A lot of body work, a lot of breath work, and a lot of silence to then get into a place that allows that subconscious mind to come through. And that's the secret. But then you look at your body and you say, if I am a vehicle for creativity, what is the quality of the creativity that I wish to produce? And then you have a responsibility to attune your body to produce things which are good and not something that's just producing ideas. So you take on personal responsibility for the quality of your thoughts.
Right. And yeah, and sometimes the quality of the thinking is we don't notice whether the quality of our thinking is improving, or are we thinking the same way that we were thinking.
Yeah. Just because you have an idea doesn't mean it's a positive one for society or a positive one for you. It's an idea. And if it comes from a place of pain and confusion, it could be it's like if somebody's thinking of a new business to start, they could be thinking of loads of ideas. Oh, I could just do this. Oh, I could do that. I could do that. But their ideas are biased because they're built around a pain point and they're trying to do something. It could be about, I need more money. It could be, I want a prestige. Whereas if you go truly and realign yourself, then actually the quality of the innovation will feed you better in the long run. That's my view.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing your view, Richard.
Okay, thank you. Lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Bye.